I'm just trying to think about when we first began these readings. We began them, I think, right when the pandemic started. I honestly don't remember the conversation we had. And then it was decided that Reverend Lisa and I would each do a daily reading. I think we volunteered actually to, or I'm not sure if we got volunteered. Anyway, bottom line is we've been doing these for over 5 years now. And sometimes it's a case of information repeating itself. But if you go to anywhere where you study anything, at some stage, things are going to get repeated. So, and then often what we do is we'll explain things which are basically the same, but in a different way or use different examples. And in a way, this is what Reverend Margaret is doing today, but it's still all good information. It's really good information. So even if you're familiar with a lot of the content, read it or listen to it, because sometimes when you see things from a different angle, it just makes a difference. And sometimes the light bulb goes on where it didn't before, even though it's the same information, but it got explained from a slightly different angle or in a slightly different way. Then it's all good. So this is called right self-care. This is right up Reverend Lisa Street, because she often talks about self-care. To her, it's really important that she gets that message out. And of course, I do the same, maybe not to the same extent, but I also do it. The first quote is from Ernest Holmes' This Thing Called Life, and it's on page 39. And here he says, there is but one creative principle, and by this he means the subjective mind of God. It is always responding to us. So in other words, prayer is always answered in some way, shape, or form when it's believed in. Okay? Belief is really the key word. A realization of the presence of God is the most powerful healing agency known to the mind of humans. Prayer is always answered. So if you're in a place right now where some things look like they could be better, then one of the best things you can do is either to start praying yourself about it, or to go to someone who will pray for you. And in our belief system, we call that spiritual mind treatment, which is the same principle that Jesus taught time after time, which is it's done unto you as you believe. There is one power that brought everything into existence, and you heard the different words for it yesterday. If you listened to yesterday, most people call it God, some call it spirit, etc. But it's that power which flows through everything that we can tap into and use by our thoughts, our feelings. And this is what Holmes is saying here in the Science of Mind textbook on page 145, when he says, a realization of the presence of God is the most powerful healing agency known to the mind of humans. In other words, know that the power of God is available to you always, and that God is always present, because if God is all there is, then God cannot not be present. And then Reverend Margaret goes on to say, and this is true for 99% of the population, there is no doubt in anyone's mind right now that right self-care should be at the top of everyone's list. We now know that there is very little we can do or be on a continuous basis if we disregard our own needs. This is all about self-care. We may live, move, and have our being in the one, but its magnificent qualities need a healthy host through which to express. And then she goes on to say, really practically, the body, of course, needs right nutrition, rest, and physical use. I just came back from the gym. These things are no-brainers, but are we as careful with the nurturance of our souls? It is easy to instantly tune into everything that is taking place on a worldwide basis because of our technological tools. But should we? You know what she's talking about here? Social media, the news online, etc., etc. Apparently, there will always be some tragedy or murderous activity taking place somewhere as long as we are ignorant of our shared spirituality. And she's talking about the human race as a whole here. Okay? We know how to help physically if we can, and we also know how to engage in healing prayer work, which is always at hand. But do we fill the rods and cones of our eyes with every destructive scene? And it's a good question. I mean, it's a really good question. Is it good to watch the news? Because let's face it, 90% of what you see on the news, quote unquote, is bad news. It is. And I guess that's because that's what people watch. They've tried good news outlets and they don't work for whatever wild and wonderful reason. So what Reverend Margaret is saying is, should we be watching it? Well, let's see what she says after that. I'm going to come back to this. The need for inner restoration and equilibrium is greater than ever. Inner restoration and inner equilibrium. The world of affairs cannot help with this. It cannot be healthy until we bring soul care into it. It's up to us to know enough to bathe in the waters of deep spiritual renewal. So what she's saying is, on several levels, our senior minister, Reverend Jesse, is always telling us to keep the high watch. In other words, whatever you see going on out there, your job is to visualize and hold in mind what it is that you would like to see in its place. So when men, women, and children, civilians, are being killed indiscriminately in different parts of the world, and they are, our job is to see a world that works for everyone. That is our job. And it's our job to build up that spiritual base within ourselves that allows us to do that. So that when we watch the news and it's bad news, which, as I said, 90% of the time it is, we can see beyond that and not get dragged into it. And we can actually envision what we would like to put in its place. But we're not all at the level that we can do that. I mean, I get dragged into a lot of the stuff that's going on in the world until I realize and I pull myself out of it. Yes, there are probably spiritual people in the world who can watch it, and almost 100% they can be at ease and see what they want to see in the world. People, I guess, like the Dalai Lama, when somebody asked him, "What is your religion?" he said, "Compassion." That was, or is, his religion. But we're not all at that level. So that's why we need to continually, every single day, do some prayer work. We need to do take some quiet time. You know, even on a practical level, tomorrow I'm helping to give a workshop at our local community college put on by the Dispute Resolution Center in Montgomery County here. It's about conflict resolution. But my part of it is twofold. It's to talk about mindfulness, and it's to talk about listening, and in particular, active listening, which are two important things. So that all these things are interrelated. But the bottom line is, don't get overwhelmed. Take it a little chunk at a time if you have to do, and then gradually build it up. You know, when you go down to the gym, or when I went down to the gym at first, when I returned to the gym after quite a while, I didn't start actually even the same weights that I'm doing today. No, I couldn't do it. I was probably about a half of what I'm at now, maybe even less. And it's because we have to build up our muscles. And in this case, we're building up our spiritual muscles, which is always a good thing. The affirmation on top of I am the place where God stands forth in the world as me is I know my inner needs. I turn within regularly to my deep source of good and allow myself renewal, restoration, and regeneration. And that's what it's all about. I know my inner needs. I turn within regularly to my deep source of good and allow myself renewal, restoration, and regeneration. And that kind of sums the whole thing up in one. So once again, if you like these readings, please share them. It's wonderful to get a like. It's phenomenal to get it when someone has shared the reading. It's really good. And then to ask the people with whom you share it to share it again, because we're not blowing our own horn here. We're doing this to try to make the world a better place. We're doing this to make the world a better place. Take the word try out of it. So I'll be back tomorrow at 5. Reverend Weissel will be here. And, well, she'll be on Creative Life Spiritual Center's Facebook page at about 9:15 tomorrow morning. And I believe, I've been busy all day, I believe Daniel Mercadal, one of our practitioners, kind of our main practitioner, was online at about 11:15 a.m. this morning doing midday meditation. So lots to go for. And if you want to know more, we have a book study on a Monday. We have a book study Wednesday, both in the evening. We have Philosophy Friday. If you need to know more, there's a link there. You can get information. So stay tuned in. Our job, as we said, is simply to make the world a better place and not be partisan about anything. Until next time, namaste.